The monster most now call the Golden State Killer has terrorized people up and down the state of California for decades.
We've got 56 attacks with over 75 victims that he let live, and then 10 victims down in Southern California that he killed.
His last known attack was in Orange County in 1986, but that wasn't the last time someone heard from him.
April 5th, 2001 is when the Sacramento Bee publishes their article about the DNA link between the Northern California East Area rapist attacks and the Southern California original Night Stalker, saying this is one and the same guy. The next day after the Sac Bee comes out with that article, he's calling a Sacramento-based victim.
Cold case detective Paul Holes doesn't think it's a coincidence.
I believe that he saw that article and he knew ahead of time that victim's phone number and called her.
She was just one of the many rape victims he called over the years.
Basically, he's making obscene type of statements about these are the sex acts that you're going to be doing to me again.
He even found one of his rape victims at work 5 years later.
And he calls her while she's at work. And the only way that he knew she was at work, in my opinion, is he probably was a customer and saw one of his former victims at that Denny's restaurant and went outside and called her.
Until a few months ago, only the original detectives on the case knew about the 1982 phone call.
This is very significant because we had this 1981 to 1986 gap. And so everybody in current generation investigators assume this guy was in custody. We know that he is capable of going silent for long periods of time.
Which is why the search for clues continues, even 31 years after his last attack.
I just learned about that within the last 2 weeks.
He's talking about these quilted zipper pouches that the Golden State Killer stole from one of his victims' homes.
It's not listed on their stolen item inventory.
The serial killer is known for stealing personal items from his victims, things like class rings and collectible coins.
One of the most unusual things he stole was 14 place settings of this Noritake china.
The china was valued at about $1,200, but Detective Holes doesn't believe he wanted it for the money.
I think it's very possible he kept that china himself or gave it to family or friends. And in fact, I think he possibly just served his family Thanksgiving dinner on that china. He would be getting a thrill of feeding his family on this china and remembering what he did to those victims.
Photos of the china were recently released to the public with hopes that someone would recognize it. The pictures got the detective wondering how he was able to carry such fragile dishware by himself.
She had kept the china stored in this quilted vinyl china storage sets.
Detectives have released photos of the circular storage sets exclusively to Crime Watch Daily.
This china may still be stored in that storage set today. And that's what I'm hoping is somebody's going, oh, I recognize this particular pattern of china, and oh yeah, it's also stored in that type of storage set.
In addition to the china, the killer also stole expensive flatware. Detectives believe his taste for the finer things is very telling.
When you consider that this killer up to this point had done 37 other attacks, and then now in the 38th attack, all of a sudden he's stealing this fine china. So it tells me that potentially he has been exposed to seeing nicer china. It might suggest that demographically his upbringing was a little bit more well-bred than somebody like me who never was exposed to fine china growing up.
That profile fits with what detectives have suspected all along, given that most of the attacks occurred in middle to upper-class neighborhoods.
He blends into those communities. His vehicle blends into those communities. He's not going into very low-income neighborhoods and committing these attacks. So that right there is telling about how he appears.
Even though his attacks moved into Southern California, Detective Holes doesn't believe the suspect did.
I think it's entirely possible he never moved his home out of the Sacramento area. He is attacking while he is traveling, and I believe he's traveling for his job.
Other possible descriptions of the Golden State Killer.
White male, 5'8" to 5'10", 160, 180 pounds, intelligent and sophisticated. He's probably somebody that is fantasy driven, has a normal family life, relatively successful, both financially as well as, with their personal lives.
For more than 4 decades, the Golden State Killer has managed to elude capture, but Detective Holes believes they're finally closing in on him.
Over time, I've gotten a much better understanding on who this guy is and who I need to be looking for. He wanted law enforcement to think he was the semi-transient troll under the bridge, going around the countryside, raping while he's needing food and money from these victims. And I don't think that's him at all.
If you have any information on this case, please contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. I'm Chris Hansen. If you like this story, make sure you tune in every day to Crime Watch Daily. You can find where the show airs in your city at crimewatchdaily.com. Watch it live or record it on your DVR and watch it at night. And to all those criminals out there, remember, we are watching.